Okay, let's just give it a few seconds because this takes a while to warm up. Okay, so I think we're recording for real. Today's a big night for us. Like one of our favorite people. I mean, we don't know Laura Waters, but we know her publication. I love it. Laura Waters, who runs, runs the right word? New Jersey Education Report. Yeah. Which is, Sean, as you've put some information on there. I put some information on there. I know Cy has, but it's such a great resource to learn about what's going on with schools in other communities throughout the state of New Jersey. So, Laura, why don't you tell us a little bit about, like, if you don't mind, some background, like, how did you get this? Like, why, how, like, it's, this thing that's great. And I'm really curious as to how that all started.
That's a good question. It actually started personally and just in a very small way. I have 4 kids. My youngest has multiple disabilities, and I was fighting the good fight as parents of kids with disabilities and sometimes without disabilities fight to make sure their kid gets the best possible education. So I started going to school board meetings, and then I ran on a slate with 2 other people for my local school board, and we won. And I started learning a lot. And I'm just sort of someone who figures things out by writing. And so my older son said to me, "Hey, I'm going to make you a blog." So he put up something on Blogspot, which was an old platform, and I started writing. And then I kept learning, and I started realizing that my concerns about my own little situation with one of my 4 children was actually much bigger, and that it went far beyond special education. There were fundamental inequities in the New Jersey public school system with regards to access, with regards to school quality. And not that there aren't other states that share this, but I was very focused on New Jersey. So I kept learning, kept writing. More people started reading. I was shocked. I remember the day I said, "Oh my God, 35 people read this today." And I thought that was such a milestone. And I started doing freelance educational analysis for New Jersey Spotlight and WHYY and a few other publications. Then I got hired to work for a company called Education Post. And eventually I was really, really lucky. And 2 state-found nonprofits said they would fund me so that I could write just about New Jersey. And instead of what I was doing, which was New Jersey part-time and nationally most of the time. And they got enough funding to rebuild the site, to rename it, to rebrand it, and to offer me what I really need, which was digital support, because I'm not a digital native, and I'm also really clueless about these kinds of things. So anyway, so about probably 3 years ago, we launched New Jersey Education Report, and it's been going really well. And I keep learning, and I keep getting angry, but I find things that we do well, and I do try to focus on it. Though people say I'm not allowed to call it blog anymore, your platform's really depressing. And I don't mean it to be depressing. It's because kids aren't depressing. All kids have potential to do the best they can, and that's not every kid is the same, but you can always find bright spots, and I need to do a better job of finding those. But I am still very focused on equity, which a problem we haven't solved here.
Yeah. So my understanding, if I remember reading somewhere, both your parents were educators. Is that true?
No, I didn't grow up in New Jersey. I grew up in New York, if you can tell.
Well, I can hear it now.
My kids say, "Mom, say coffee." because they think it's funny. I grew up in Queens, and my father was a social studies teacher in New York City public schools. My mother was a school social worker in New York City public schools. So yes, I am the daughter of two public school teachers who moved, actually was first in the Bronx. We moved to Queens to go to better schools. And when I was ready for high school and had siblings, we moved to Long Island to go to better schools. I've never been to a private school. I went to public college too.
Where'd you go to college?
I I did undergraduate
SUNY, right?
work at SUNY Albany and graduate work at SUNY Binghamton.
Cool. Laura and Sean, do you have any questions? I always get accused of talking too much, right? So why don't you go ahead? You guys step up and ask a question.
Yeah, just a nice note. My daughter's at Binghamton right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So one of the questions I had for you was, have you noticed a change? You know, there was some talk about how when kids went remote during COVID and parents got a chance to kind of look and see what their kids were doing in the classroom, that sort of sparked a renewed interest in Board of Ed and other items. Have you kind of noticed that for yourself?
Yes, certainly. And it's not just New Jersey, it's nationwide. It's why there's been an increase in homeschooling. It's why there's been an increase in micro schools. There's renewed interest in other alternatives like charter schools. There's states that are passing education savings accounts, or some people call them vouchers. And there's been a drop of enrollment in traditional public schools. And that's partly because birth rate's going down, but it's also because parents got their first really clear look at what goes on in a classroom. Now, that's not really fair because it was COVID and teachers were we all were so overwhelmed and making the best of a really rotten situation. With a lot of ignorance. Like, wait, we didn't really have to be 6 feet apart. So there was an adaptation to circumstances that were impossible. So parents got a look into classrooms and they didn't like what they saw. And that has sparked, I would say, increased advocacy and also more of a sense of proactiveness. You know, in other words, parents are saying, wait, there are some parents who are saying, my kid would learn more if they were at home, or my kid would learn more if they did this. So, just one more thing. I think I'm talking too much.
No, you keep, yeah, please. We love it. Yeah.
Well, I just would say that we've also seen, this is nationally, I'm not talking about just New Jersey, though it's New Jersey too, is a really distressing increase in chronic absenteeism. And it's almost like the 2 years, or depending what state you were in, of interrupted learning and remote instruction made school seem optional. And that is going to have effects going far down the road in all kinds of ways. That you could say in some good way. Why do we measure learning by seat time? I mean, that's an interesting discussion. Is it really about how many the kids in the seat 6 hours, or is it that they've mastered standards? So, yeah, you can go either way with that.
Cap, you get to take a break from sucking down the whiskey in your coffee cup.
I don't know if I can suck. I do.
Do you have a question?
I do.
That you could put coherently to Laura?
I will try very well. So Laura, my question for you would be, like, it sounds like your journey sort of in getting involved and, you know, the trajectory that set you on to where you are now. What advice would you have to parents? Because I think I could speak for John and Shauna in that, you know, there's a lot of resistance from, you know, the powers that be, so to speak, about essentially advocating for our children, and that, you know,
and even parents. Well, I would include
parents.
Even parents who are like it's almost like lined. Yeah.
You know, we've been cast as like the bad guys, so to speak, and I keep saying, like, no, I do this for my children and for those children whose parents don't feel confident speaking up. So what would be your advice to all parents on varying levels. I think there's varying levels of advocacy. So what would be your advice there?
I would say that if parents are concerned about pushback, you can always, I'm speaking personally, you can always center yourself by thinking about kids. If you're talking about advocating for your own child, you just keep your child up in front, and then you shouldn't have qualms about what you're asking for. And the truth is, whether special education is kind of different, not that I haven't had to advocate for my other 3 children, parents have a lot of power, and I think a lot of times they're not aware of their power. You're in a bit, I don't know how big, how big Berkeley Heights is.
We're small.
Well, okay. So whatever the size, in a small district, you'd think you'd even have more power. But even if they're in a larger one, parents who are prepared to go up in front of a school board meeting, which takes guts, by the way, it's hard. You're nervous, you're anxious, you're afraid you're going to sound dumb, but you get up there and you speak from your heart and you speak about your kid, and that has an impact. Now, some of that is maybe just, good people on the board realizing you have a point. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's, boards hate bad press. Maybe there's a reporter in the audience, so that's becoming rarer and rarer. Maybe there's a Berkeley Heights District Watch group, community watch group, that's there taking notes and going to publish about the latest meeting and file Oprah reports. Oprah requests. Parents have the right to information. Schools are really bad at giving information. Partly that's administrative. It's a pain in the butt, and there's regulations, and sometimes they just don't want to. Like, how much do you know about, and I'm just talking about Berkeley Heights because that's where you're all from. I could be talking about any of the other 600 school districts in New Jersey. How well do you know, how much information do you have about how your school has spent their federal emergency COVID funds, their ESSER funding? Most people don't know, but that's your money.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Laura, because a board member actually asked about that last year.
Oh, really?
And it turned, and it was one board member that was elected on change, or it was 2 years ago, actually. And the circus that occurred as a result of that question from the rest of the board, remind me, I'll send you the clip of that. This wasn't a parent, this was a board member asking for this. And like, you thought they would be at, I mean, it was one of the, well, it's not strange to me now because it keeps happening, but at the time, it was one of the strangest responses to a question I have ever witnessed in my life. Yeah, I'm sorry, let me cut you off, but you kind of threw me in.
It's really distressing because baked into the American Rescue Plan, which is Biden's plan, the Biden administration's plan to funnel billions of dollars into school districts to help schools recover from learning loss. One of the key elements of that is supposed to be transparency, both collaborating with parents and community members and teachers and residents to come up with how that money is going to be spent, and then to be clear about whether they're following through. Now, there are a few districts that are doing a really good job with this. I was looking at Irvington, which is not normally a district you write home about, and they're just doing a superb job of keeping the community informed of how they're spending those emergency dollars that run out in a year. So I think that we just do a poor job in general in New Jersey. Some states do it better. As I said, occasionally you'll find a district that's doing it well, of communicating basic things. And that kind of veil over thing, that kind of sense of mystery, and I don't really know what's there, and really who do you supposed to talk to anyway, that discourages parents from coming forward. And that in turn discourages the system from improving. Because if they're not listening to their stakeholders, how are they going to get better? How do they know what's wrong? I was on a school board for 12 years, and it can be like a bubble, like any kind of
Oh, yeah.
you know? And I had to work really hard at getting out of that bubble. So I knew what was going on in the community and what people really thought. And getting back to your question about COVID, I think that the shutdowns and the confusion and the disruption to our world in sort of an unintended consequence empowered parents to feel, wait, this is my system. I pay for this system. My kids are depending on this system. I have a right to have my voice heard. And, it can be expressed in ways that you might not like. I don't want to get too political here, but
yeah, that's fine. And we don't mind. I mean, the whole parental rights thing, which I believe so fervently that parents should have rights. I mean, the parents are the ultimate arbiter of what their kid needs. And you can move all the way into Moms for Liberty or all the way into how, I'm blanking on his name, the Virginia governor, Terry McAuliffe, lost the election by saying, oh, leave it to teachers. They know better than parents. So we're like shifting in the wind. We haven't found, I don't know if we ever do, the median where we're giving parents the power and the information they need, but also allowing, I don't even want to say experts, allowing some kind of synergy between parents and administrators. So one of the things that, and I think that, so there's a model for that in New Jersey, which was, and I don't know, like everything else, it's devolved into something else, but it started out okay. And I think if it maintained fidelity, it would have worked out better. But they looked at the children's system of care in New Jersey and it started under Whitman.
Mm-hmm.
And they started getting rid of what they called these carts in each county and tried to kind of create more coherency because a lot of our kids were going into residential facilities. And one of the things, the very first things that they really kind of wanted to sort of ingrain was familial input. They created something called family service organizations, child family teams, nothing about the kid without the kid. I mean, there was sort of this big movement in New Jersey because the feeling was that sort of these bureaucracies that impacted children really stepped away from parents. And not only, it wasn't even just a moral thing, but it costs a lot of money to put a kid in a residential facility. It's an expensive thing. And I feel like education, it's such a strange debate that it used to be that, like when you look at the research and the evidence, stakeholder involvement always produces better outcomes. And it's accepted everywhere except in this really weird context of education. And education, for some reason, it's still a debate. And that blows my mind,
Yeah, I think there are efforts, and I don't know if they're genuine efforts or they're just cosmetic, but there have been, whether it's every district is supposed to have a special education parents group. I'm using that as an example.
Yeah,
it could be a million other things to allow for input. But in my experience in looking at districts, they are not all the time, but there's a tendency to make them cosmetic. And so then there's this gap between both what parents want and what their kids are getting, what the parents want for their kids and what their kids are getting. And there's also a gap between the parents and the residents' ability to obtain clear information about what's going on in the schools and what the school is permitting. And by school, I mean district leaders and school board members to get out into the open. And so you do that, and it breeds lack of trust, it breeds resentment. And we see a lot of that these days regarding education. And education is really complicated. You have so many competing interests. There's teachers' unions, there's different groups of parents, there's municipalities that collect tax dollars, because that's the way we fund schools here, to direct to schools. So you get town councils and mayors, and in New Jersey we have so many elected people, and it becomes more of a power struggle, and it's not hard for the interests of children to get lost.
The last thing. I mean, I honestly, like, if you look at a year's worth of our board meetings, I mean, like last year, for the 2 years, it's just been about policies to retain power and silence people. I mean, you barely, like, you might get a few minutes about like something new for the kids, or, something, but it's like 90% not about the kids, Yeah.
There's also, you can't get away from politics. I mean, education and politics are
intertwined.
Yeah. So all the backlash against standardized measurements of student learning, standardized tests, standards, sex ed standards, whatever. I mean, it just all becomes, all of a sudden, Governor Murphy is issuing edicts about gender identity. Like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? So, I mean, that's me. So.
Yeah, and that's fair. Yeah, you have an absolute right to. Yeah, we don't all agree on the same thing. Me and Shauna and Laura see different shit. Yeah, I'm right usually, but I tolerate.
On the topic, when you said standardized test, I wanted to kind of see if you are comfortable sharing your views on the new New Jersey GPA requirements, because I have a child with an IEP. Just this has caused more stress in our household than I can even tell you.
I'm sorry.
And I feel like it's such, for me personally, I think it's kind of ridiculous. You either meet the requirements that your school sets or you don't, but kind of wanted to hear someone else, who's written so much about education, like kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Well, right now, yeah, sure. Right now, New Jersey is one of 9 states that has a high school graduation test requirement. And there used to be many more states that had it, and it's no longer a thing. And the only reason New Jersey has it is because we have a law that was passed, I don't know, it has to be 50 years ago. Don't quote me on that. I don't have to go back and look. There's a state law that says that high school graduates of New Jersey public schools, which includes traditional districts and charter schools, are required to pass a test that certifies that they are at, it doesn't say grade level, proficient in math and English language arts or reading. And all that has to happen is the legislature has to pass a law that's already been written, is already a proposal that says, we're not going to do it this way. We're getting rid of the high school graduation test. And would solve a lot of problems. What happened is that we used to rely, and if you don't want all this background, then just tell me and I'll stop. But
no, please.
We used to,
you're way better than us talking. So
no, the way we used to the way we did it before was by not creating a separate test for high school. We had students would take English language arts and math tests in 9th and 10th and 11th grade. Okay. And that was partly based on federal education law. Then the law changed and you only had to do it in 9th grade. And you have to test kids I'm just talking about math and reading now, 3rd through 8th grade and once in high school. once the law changed, the federal education law that just keeps getting renamed and reauthorized and having, tweaks and various things. Once that law changed, all of a sudden New Jersey didn't have to give their 10th and 11th grade test anymore. They only had to test kids through 9th grade. So what are they going to do? They're going to make them take all these tests they don't need. Meanwhile, there's a testing backlash and parents are opting out. And there's the whole park thing. So New Jersey told its vendors to create a test that would just meet the law, that law that says you need to have a test that shows you're proficient in math and reading, proficient enough to graduate from high school. So a vendor created the test called the NJGPA, Graduation Proficiency Assessment, I think. And they set the standards as supposed to be proficient in algebra, that's the math part, and 10th grade reading. The test results came in. This was a year after COVID. Hardly anyone passed the test. Not hardly anyone. It was below 40% of kids. Sorry, that's my kid's dog. And so under the current commissioner, they lowered the standards so that many more kids pass. Now, if your kid doesn't pass it, there's alternatives. I'm sorry you're sweating, Shauna, because your son could, it's your son, not your daughter. I don't know. I don't remember. Could use a portfolio. And if the school's giving you pressure, then that's wrong because there are multiple alternatives to NJGPA. That's a really long answer. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Ultimately, he's fine. But it was stressful. And, like you said, that's actually how I became involved in this, because I had to advocate for something that he had in the past that our district then removed, which was a small group setting class specifically for math. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, now, is it in your kid's IEP that he has math in a small group?
It was, and they removed it and put him in a gen ed class. And
they're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are.
Drive me nuts. Please.
I think you need to learn about Berkeley Heights before you say something that they're not allowed to do. I don't think they recognize that there are rules and shit that they're not supposed to do.
I know.
You swore. I heard it.
I did say. I said shit. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Anyway. So if New Jersey could pass the law that's already written, if the legislature could, and the governor would sign it, then your son would not, and you would, and your family would not have been under that stress. The district still, they even changed the name of a New Jersey high school diploma. If you read me, you've probably read this. It used to be called high school diploma from New Jersey meant you were college and career ready. And now what it says is you're high school graduation ready, which is very circular. So
it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. And there were state board members who said, but wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And that's where it's like I'm trying not to curse because my husband uses.
Oh no, please, because I don't want to be the only one that curses on this. So if you curse, oh my God, it would be great, man. It would just take so much shit off of me.
It's the elephant in the room, okay? The board and this is a tiny little piece of education politics, and it's not just New Jersey. I happen to live here, and where my kids went to school. You have this absurdity, this tautological absurdity of a high school graduation diploma, a high school diploma being defined as it means you graduated from high school, which doesn't mean anything. It's just word salad. And then you have a board member saying, but wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And on to the next item on the agenda. And that in its way is an emblem of why you have the Berkeley Heights Community Watch, and you file Oprah requests and you stand up in front of school board meetings because you're asking for honesty, you're asking for transparency, you're asking for a voice. And many parents, I say this about myself, I had the luxury of time to learn a lot of stuff and resources to do things. And a lot of parents in New Jersey don't. So they don't have the time to go. They can't go to school board meetings. They can't spend the day reading court decisions. It's so that just hardens the inequities.
So I want, Laura, do you have a question? Because I had something I wanted to go with.
I actually just had a quick follow-up because we were kind of getting into the standardized testing discussion.
Yeah, sure.
So it seems to me, and Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as if we are kind of across the board lowering standards in a way too. And I don't know, I guess it's like if you're struggling with transparency in the way in which those are reported from your district or the state, it would seem, the question is, are we lowering it to make our kids look better, or are our kids doing better? I guess there's confusion. Like, have we sort of settled for less than when we should maybe be trying to achieve more?
All right, let's make a distinction between the standards, which are on the DOE website for each grade in each subject, and how we measure proficiency. We're not lowering the standards, but what we've, not in every case, but for instance, in the high school test and in other tests too, what we've said is what qualifies as proficiency is lower. So in other words, if we say, and this is not how they grade it, I'm just doing this because it's easier to say, because I'm not a psychometrician. Sorry, it's just my kids. So if you say for English, for reading, you need 80% proficiency in order to say you've passed, you've mastered that standard. And then too many kids fail it. So then you say, you know what? Let's say they only have to get 60% right. We haven't changed the standard. We've changed how we measure whether you're proficient or not. So what we've done is and it's not just us, and it's partly because of the pandemic. There was this feeling the kids have lost so much. I'm going to close the door.
That's cool.
I'm sorry, I have a noisy family. So anyway, so there were all kinds of good reasons, heartfelt reasons about why for instance, we canceled standardized tests in 2020, right? And 2021, the state had a vendor create a test called Start Strong that was short and would supposedly turn around high quality information. It kind of did, except it was in the beginning of the year. So you didn't know how much the kids had learned. So we haven't lowered the standards, but we've lowered how we measure whether the kids have mastered the standards.
Which is, it feels like, and I know exactly what you're saying. But it kind of feels like the same thing in a way.
Yeah, I know it does because it does. It has that effect. I just didn't.
But technically, right? It's not, one is not the other.
No, they're different, but at the same time, they are interconnected because if the school leaders know that they really only have to know 60% of the material to get this unit of study, put away, then we don't have to push them as hard. We don't have to teach them all that, they can skip that. And that has cascading effects as far as, and of course, the biggest insult is to the child and their parents, where the kid graduates from high school. I found the statistic, I found it stunning. for kids in New Jersey, community colleges, 2-year colleges, which is a 2-year degree, obviously, the graduation rate in 6 years is 29%. In other words, we're sending kids, and not our high-income kids, or they probably wouldn't be going to community colleges, to community colleges, and they have a 70% chance of never getting out with a diploma. I mean, there's something wrong.
Yes, and so that brings me to my next sort of poke in terms of trying to kind of pick your brain. And this will be the last question, I promise.
That's fine.
There was this huge documentary that came out a while back. I mean, this is like years ago, Waiting for Superman. I mean, I think most people saw it. And it was, I mean, at the time, I don't think I was, I think I was just becoming a parent around that time, but it was like a mind-blowing, because one of the arguments that it made was even the best private schools, you could go to the best schools in America, and you would still not be able to compete very well with the rest of the world. And I know that there's parts of that documentary that have been debunked, and there's also sort of political things that sort of go on. Yeah. But I like when I grew up in Harrison, which is a suburb outside of Newark, and I didn't go to public schools because for my parents, that it just wouldn't have been an option in those towns, right? And I feel like when you look at a school system like you look at our school system, Berkeley Heights, well funded, we have a $63 million budget. And not only that, our kids are resourced outside of the schools. We tend to be a wealthy,
more and more.
Yeah, we tend to be a wealthier community, and we have like significant issues in terms of like declines and transparency and all this other stuff. And then you start thinking, and so it feels like from here, it feels like sort of hopeless, but not. I mean, it feels like we can get, I don't know. It feels like even if we get there, what the hell do we do? Even if we get the right people in there, what do we do? But then you think about like cities like Newark and Camden and the crushing poverty that exists there and the bureaucracy that exists there. And then that feels even more hopeless. And then you think about it nationwide and like, what is it that we're doing? Like, how is it that countries like, countries in Europe and China and India that don't have our wealth, like, what is the problem? Like, from your perspective, like, what is it that we're doing wrong? Like, what is it that are those even fair comparisons, or is it correct to say that American schools aren't performing as well? Is that a correct thing to say? If it's not, if it is, then what is it that we're doing that's just not working?
That's a really big question. According to the international tests that are called PISA, P-I-S-A, we are doing worse. I don't remember the exact numbers.
Yeah.
I think there's 70, it's tests that's given not to all kids, it's representative samples, like Nate, but in 72 industrialized countries. And I think we're 36th in math. And
I mean, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I may have the numbers wrong, but you'll find it on my platform. So I don't know enough about other countries' school districts. I know a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm an authority to say what they're doing right and we're doing wrong. I do think that part of the problem is not the kids and not the teachers. It's this really dense, like, million Lego system we've built up around the education industrial complex, which makes it really expensive, which makes it really hard to individualize, which makes it prone to political whims.
Yep. And corruption.
A lot of corruption, a lot of wasted money. We spend more money than any other country. New Jersey spends almost more money than any other state. We're right behind. New York I don't really count DC because that's like its own thing. And I think we're spend more than Connecticut at this point, but we're right at the top. We think that the answer to everything is more money. So you read this all, oh, we need more funding. How many times do we hear full funding? It's not the amount. You need equitable funding, no question. You have to have enough money. But money alone, throwing more money is not going to fix it. We have to have more innovation. We have to give principals more autonomy. We have to give parents more choices, whether that's traditional schools or charter schools or micro schools. We have to stop making the definition of a good teacher how many degrees they have. I mean, there's so much.
Right, to be on efficacy, right?
Yeah, there's so much research that because of the way the bureaucracy works, teachers get more money if they have a master's degree. There is zero evidence that having a master's degree makes that teacher a better teacher. In fact, there's evidence that it does not. It's the same. It all comes out the same. So why are we giving a bump for a master's degree? Why are we giving a bump for years served? That's why our salaries are so low for teachers. We don't spend enough, by the way. We do not pay teachers, effective teachers, enough. They're victims of the complex of the Legos. There's no way for a gifted, devoted teacher to reach children in a way that he or she wants to reach them, because they're so struck by unnecessary structure and strictures that have nothing to do with what's better for kids. So I think that I wish we could blow it all up.
Yeah, I know. But I asked that question deliberately because I think it's a lock. It's like you ask the question and you don't even know where to start untangling, really what's broken. I mean, for me, I think what's striking in comparison is how divorced from research we are in our decision making.
Yes.
Like, some Northern European countries, there has to be vetted referee journals supporting something before it's even considered. For us, it's just the right parents who have the best relationship with the people in power who are elected. They get that idea, and that's what passes for a good idea. Right. And I don't think that's just Berkeley Heights. I think that's everywhere.
We've known for 30 years that balanced literacy doesn't teach kids how to read. It's only now that we're starting to say, oh, wait, they need phonics and general knowledge too.
Right.
So it takes us so long to catch up. The other thing I would say is that I would, if we could blow it up, we can't blow it up. When I was younger, I used to think we should blow it up. Now I understand that wouldn't really work, though. I still get the hankering now and then.
Every morning.
We know nothing about that.
We need to divorce zip code from district assignment. It stifles children whose parents can't afford to get a mortgage in wherever, Montclair or wherever. It stifles districts from having to compare themselves to other schools. I think that because of the way it's evolved, we stifle competition, and competition, I think, can be good. You'll notice that when charter school, not all the time, I don't want to go there, forget that. I think competition can be healthy in any system. And so that's so basic. I mean, how can we do that? There just seems to me the essence of lack of social justice. how can you have something more socially unjust than telling a family that their kid can only go to a school where they can afford the rent?
So I brought that up once. I got yelled at by like 90% of the people in this town.
New Jersey loves local control. They love
and I can't stand it because I'm going to tell you, it just locks kids in, and it sort of makes your worldview myopic. It doesn't expose kids. I mean, it's just we have that. That's a great point. That's an excellent point.
So I mean, and I don't know how politically that happens. We did have an interdistrict public school choice program that started 12 years ago. Immensely popular, long waiting list, but it requires the state to fund it. And they capped it. So it's sort of in suspended animation. But that allowed districts that had empty seats to open up those seats to kids within the same county. I don't remember what the distance was. There's some mileage thing. And then the school, the home school, would pay a very small tuition to that district. And actually, I think most of that was covered by the state. Parents loved it, ate it up. It's frozen. It's too popular. So.
All right, so we're gonna. I mean, man, I wish we had 2 hours, but we
I
don't.
know.
Because I have to actually go to work. But you've been like you are a wealth of knowledge.
Are you interested in a superintendent position? Do you hold?
Are you interested in it? Yeah. Do you want to become a superintendent?
No.
You sure? Tastes really well. So njeducationreport.com is the website domain, right? That's your domain name?
njeducationreport.com.
And what you'll find out there first of all, like you'll get a knowledge of schools that you really, it's such a valuable insight. The value to me is I think it helps communities learn, parents and communities learn from one another how to advocate effectively, because what one person does in one district, another person can watch out for or think about in another. It gives a platform to people that I think otherwise would be relegated to 5 minutes in a board meeting and not get their message out. I mean, it is
3, sorry.
3 minutes. It is probably one of the most valuable. I mean, for me, and I'm not really blowing, I'm not trying to blow rainbows up your ass. I mean, I really feel it's probably one of the most valuable institutions in New Jersey, and I really hope it grows and that people utilize that to not just share in their community, but like write an article, put it in.
I love submissions. I want as many voices as possible.
You're probably gonna be getting one from me soon. Laura and Shauna know what I'm talking about. Did you see that email I sent this morning?
Yeah.
Or this afternoon? Yeah. You're gonna get something from me.
Oh boy.
Awesome. If you go to the homepage, there's a box where you can say you want to submit something. Just click on it. Or give me
Laura, what's the criteria for an individual in the state to submit content to be published, or there is none? Okay.
You have to it's only in very rare cases that I allow writers to remain anonymous, and that's if they're fearful of retaliation and I still know who they are and I can verify it. Otherwise, you have to put up, I edit, but I'm a really good editor. So anybody who has something to say.
Yep. We have the same standard on anonymity because like teachers don't want their names out there.
No, as long as I can verify.
Same thing that we do. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You are a state treasurer, Laura Waters. Even
though
this
was a pleasure.
You're really a New Jerseyan now. You're one of us.
That's all over 30 years.
You're getting a hoodie. We're gonna send you a hoodie.
You're gonna get one of our hoodies. So, Laura, last question. Out of the 3 of us, why do you like me the best?
Oh, it's because of your lack of profanity.
Oh, thank you, Laura. All right, guys, have a good night, Laura. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.